Hey guys, real quick, before we jump into today's episode, my book, Get Wealthy for Sure, the number one financial strategy for business owners to multiply wealth predictably, has been a bestseller and it continues to reach more and more people because of all the support. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for sharing this with family, friends, coworkers, and everybody that you know. To show my appreciation for all of our podcast listeners, I'm giving away a free ebook and audiobook version of the book, Get Wealthy for Sure. All you have to do to download your free ebook and your free audiobook is go to getwealthyforsure.com. That's getwealthyforsure.com. The world is going through changes. Changes happening at a speed that we have never seen before. This is leading to disruption, chaos, panic, fear, hysteria, and a turbulent economy and marketplace. How do you protect your wealth in a turbulent world? How do you invest for cash flow in alternative assets to escape the rat race in times of uncertainty? How do you decentralize yourself, your family, your community, your business, and your investments to become sovereign and escape the matrix? If you are looking for strategies, tactics, and techniques to escape the rat race and matrix, you are in the right place. My name is MC Lobsher, and this is Cashflow Ninja. This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Lobsher. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode and spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. That's cashflowninja.com. There's over 1,000 podcast episodes, 4 books, reports, webinars, and much, much more, all at cashflowninja.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the number one newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy space and the alternative asset investing world, the Wealth Dojo. You can subscribe to the Wealth Dojo by going to cashflowninja.com/subscribe. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by my friend Jason Yarusi. He is incredible when it comes to mindset, building out a life by design. And he's doing incredible things with his wife, Billy, in their real estate business. Jason, it's great to see you.
MC, great to be here.
It's been a while. So if you are listening to this, and this is your first time that you're listening to Jason Yarusi, go to cashflowninja.com and just type in his name. Jason and Peely has been on the show before, and we've been on a journey together right now for many, many years, and they always provide so much value and just bring it. So whether they're doing live events, whether they're doing podcasts, when you're around them, you're gonna just feel the value that comes from them. So I'm excited to share you with a lot of new listeners and viewers. So Jason, let's start there. For folks that are not familiar with you and what you get up to these days, can you share a little bit about your background and journey and what you get up to today?
Yeah, MC. So great to be back. And, it's been like 6-7 years we've known each other, right? And so It's fun because as we go through this journey, right, we come back, maybe we don't talk for a few months or some time in between, and we each just continue to progress. And it's just fun because we're doing this separately, but right, the energy and the thoughts and the actions, right, they're in the same direction. They're in that same position where we're both working to not only better ourselves, but better us or those around us. So Congrats on everything you have, the book, all the things you're doing out there. So my name is Jason Yarusi. I live down here in just south of Nashville in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I've been down here for 5 years. I primarily invest in real estate, primarily commercial real estate, majority apartment buildings. So we buy apartment buildings. We've acquired a little over $350 million of real estate since 2017, primarily apartment buildings, as mentioned. About 95% is acquiring existing assets. We have the other 5% is self-storage. We have some office, we have a motel, and we have some development sites, mainly down here in Middle Tennessee. And then we have projects in 6 states besides Tennessee. Usually we'll buy them on a syndication model. About 75% are on a syndication model. The other 25% are some other, either ourselves or a partnership will go and do a repositioning plan, meaning we buy this with the intent to improve the property, everything from just simple fixing up the marketing, giving signage, cleaning up the street appeal, to improving the on-site operations, putting in a different management company, improving the management company, potentially managing it out of our office itself. To increase the revenue, control the expenses, bolster the bottom line so it has more value into the future as an additional cash flow stream for a future buyer when we do sell it somewhere between 5 or 7 years down the road.
Nice. And the big thing about you, Jason, too, is mindset, what I love about it, right? And I mean, you talk about all the 75 hards that you've done, those challenges, and you continually to push yourself. So I'm going to start there because I think that's one of the most important things, right? Is like, the mindset, and then translating that into habits, right? There's like an African saying that somebody shared with me the other day that I heard many, many times growing up. It's like, if a cat wants to turn into a lion, it's got to stop chasing rats, right? And it all comes down to habits. So if you want to grow from a cat to a lion, you can't do the same thing that cats are just doing. You have to start doing the things that lions are doing. And the mindset that you bring to it is unbelievable. And you've kind of like created this brand around it, right? Live 100 and a podcast besides for the stuff that you get into with real estate. Tell me a little bit about mindset and the importance to you and everything that you tackle and do, because you're also challenging yourself in everywhere in life, right? Whether it's physical, whether it's business. And then also share a little bit about just Live 100 and how that started and what that's about.
Yeah. So, it reminds me of the thought of a lion doesn't concern itself with mosquitoes on its back, right? It's that same kind of context, is that for many years, the mosquitoes were bothering me, right? I was being bothered by all these things around me, and I was allowing outside circumstances to really dictate my path, right? And there's a point where you either live your life like that, right? And potentially you're not happy with your life. You're filled with hatred or gluttony or fear or regret or disgust, right? And that overwhelms us, right? 95% of your day is subconscious, right? So if you're having the same repeated day in and day out, and you're not paying attention to it, and then you're asking yourself, why am I not happy? Well, one day you're either going to say, okay, enough's enough. I have to figure out what I'm doing wrong, or you just continue down that path. And then the results are out of your control, right? Just by luck, you might have a better life, but the majority of people, right, they live a life that they're not happy with. And I was on that path for many years, right? I was working in New York City as a bartender. I'd left school, had faced some challenges in my formative years, had some deaths, some loss, a bunch of people around me. And I wasn't happy with my life, right? I wasn't fulfilled in what I was doing. I didn't have a lot of confidence in what I was doing. My parents had their own challenges. And so here I am living in New York City, just getting chaotic results, right? I'm not making any money, right? I'm just working just random jobs. I don't have great relationships, right? The relationships I'm in weren't going well, right? But I'm just doing the same thing every day, right? Same thing, right? Don't like it, but continue the next day and the next day. One night, I'm leaving work at 2:33 in the morning, riding my bike across Manhattan back to my apartment, and I get hit by a car and put in the hospital. I get like a pin in my wrist. I have a broken bone in my shoulder, a bunch of stitches. And lo and behold, I get out of the hospital, and all I'm thinking about is, how do I get back to work, because I need to make money for rent. And I had this pause where I was like, man, that is a crazy thought, because here I am hating everything I have. I just get hit by a car. Luckily, it's not worse than this. And lo and behold, the only thing I'm thinking about is I got to get back to exactly doing what I don't want to be doing. Okay, well, that's a crazy thought. So I made a pact for myself, like, listen, I either need to just be okay with it, right? You are making crazy decisions. You either need to accept that you are doing crazy things so you can get crazy results and stop complaining about it, or do something different. Now, here's the pinnacle moment. I didn't know what to do different, right? I didn't know how, okay, what do I do? Well, I just started saying, well, what am I doing? Let's just try the opposite. So stop drinking out late at night. Okay, let's stop there. Okay, start getting up at a set time in the morning. Start putting in a workout plan. Start actually reading books that have something that I could gain knowledge from. Like, I left school with the thought of like, oh, I'll never read again. Like, as crazy as that sounds today, right? Like, that was my thought. And lo and behold, it wasn't like this magical transformation day one to day two, but things started to get proactively better. One, because my mind was looking for better. Instead of just looking constantly for the worst, I was looking for ways to improve. Two, I started to have some structure, right? To get back structure. I think Seneca says that, a life without design is an erratic, crazy life, right? And if you think about that, if you have no structure, no destination, no journey, well, ultimately, then whatever comes is exactly what you deserve, because it's just happening by happenstance. And from there, each and every day got a little bit better, a little bit more energetic. I started to get some momentum, and I went from working behind the bar to opening a bar, opening a restaurant. I opened and sold a brewery, ended up moving to New Jersey and helped my dad's construction business transform. We grew it, I think, like 25 times. By the end, we were done with it. Got my dad to retirement, started moving into real estate. And throughout that, things just started saying, instead of saying, oh, I don't know why this is happening, to say, okay, cool, like this happened, like I'm going to figure it out. And when you go in that mentality, things start to go in your favor because you're not accepting anything else. And so I've done a lot of physical challenges. I've run, 18 marathons in a month. I've done a couple 100-mile races. I've done a lot to push myself outside the bound, because it was just that next step of the evolution to say, what do I need to do to challenge myself to get to that next step of just seeing what's possible? And throughout that, people say, well, how'd you go from a bartender to being, acquiring a couple thousand units of real estate? And I said, well, let me look back at this journey. And, there's really three foundational blocks, right? The part of the Live 100 message is that you have to break the patterns or break the habits that no longer serve you. So you start to build the life that you truly desire. And then you can maximize those results. So it's build, break, build, and magnify. And that's the journey of the Live 100.
So and there's a couple of principles included in this. It's fascinating too, because I was just thinking when you're saying it, how do you go from where you started to where you're now? So it's great that you're documenting the process. You're working kind of backwards, saying like, okay, this is what I did, and this is kind of what I did next, and then I kind of grew from there. What are some of the principles around this Live 100 philosophy?
Yeah, so there's 9 principles, but I think most importantly, we'll focus on just 3 of them, really in the break block, because it all starts with the break block. Most people, they want to build and magnify, right? We have everybody on social media, everybody out there wants to just build and magnify, but you can't have a broken foundation and start building a house upon it, right? And so if we don't get true into where we stand today, how are we showing up, right? Well, then when we start to build, eventually it's going to fall off the tracks. Eventually we're going to go off the end of the road, right? Eventually we're going to miss the mark because we haven't done the inner work. And the first piece of it is really being self-aware. That was the hardest thing for me. It was like, okay, I'm showing up with negative thoughts. My wording is bad, right? I'm talking in a negative way. I'm just constantly mad. I'm constantly fearful. I'm just regretting everything I have. And it's not that you have to say, okay, and put yourself down about it, but you have to own it, right? So the first one is self-aware. The next piece is owning where you are, because you have to own it, right? You have to have a starting point. You have to have the starting line to say, okay, here's where I am right now. So if you're full of fear, you're full of regret, you have hatred in your life, okay, great. We understand that. You're owning it. You're not accepting it. You're not saying, oh, this is who I am. You're owning it for today so you can get to the next piece, the principle number 3, which is position yourself for greatness. If you were to look across the table and say the person today is standing right out there, that's me, right? That's how I need to be to achieve my goals, right? I need to come out there with a positive mindset. I need to come out there with confidence. I have to come out there willing to learn, willing to discover, right? Well, okay, is the person you are today that person? And if you're not, what is the first step along that line to get in that path? And when you look at those 3 parts, be self-aware about how you're showing up, own it. And that's not accepting it, but own it. So you have your starting line, and then start looking at the future you so you can start positioning yourself for where you want to be.
It's funny. I can relate to that too, because at one stage, and I think one of the defining moments in my life was when I was in a very deep, dark place, and my life was a complete mess in every single area. And after feeling sorry for myself and licking my wounds for probably, 2 days, at one stage, I sat down and I'm like, dude, everything, your entire life, everything that's here, that you did this. This is like who you are, your habits, and your behavior leading from the habits. This basically is the compounding effect to bringing you to this.
100%.
So, and I think that was the hardest thing to do. And I think sometimes that is the thing that if you can't get there, then you're never ever gonna. I mean, I felt so empowered at that point too, because I'm like, so it's no one else, which means I can't blame anybody else but this, smiley face looking back at me in the mirror, right? So it was very empowering because at that stage I was like, all right, so it's all me. And ever since then, when something happens, it's not like, oh, I can't believe X, Y, and Z or this person did that. I
Mhm.
would look at it and go, how did I let this happen? Or how did I put myself in a position to let this happen? So kind of reframe that whole thing, which then, gives you just a lot of power and control over your own life,
Yeah,
right?
you took your power back. And
Yep.
that's the biggest thing to do, is to take power back. Because when we put it on, my upbringing or my family or the school I went to or the things that's happened to me, well, then you're giving yourself a reason why it can never happen to you. But when you take it back and you say, okay, I'm owning it, right? Because it's not, regardless, right? Things happen. I understand a lot of people have had things that have happened that are not fantastic, right? I'm not saying that we weren't and they don't give that as some part of our life, but how we react to it, right? That's the next step, right? We can't go backwards. We can't undo the past, but we can start to make changes and make steps in a direction going to the future, right? And what happens is that usually, you have four different things, right? The first is that, okay, you choose an action, right? And it's completely the wrong direction. Okay, well, fine. At least we've learned something. We've taken a step, and now we can say, okay, don't go that direction again, right? Or the second, you take a step and it's kind of the right way, kind of the wrong way. Okay, now there's a lesson here, right? Okay, so what do I do to position myself or pivot, right, to that piece to continue to get myself in the right direction? Or the third would be that you take a step and it's right in the right way. Okay, so take the next step, start to build and compound. But there's the fourth piece, and the fourth piece is where the majority gets stuck in, is that you choose to take no action, right? And choosing, to do nothing is still an action, right? You've still made the
Yep.
choice. And that's where a lot of people say, well, I'm just not going to do anything, right? Well, you will not get a new, better, different life by just choosing not to do anything, because the chances are the majority of what you have right now is just going to continue to repeat itself. And that's
Yeah.
where we are here, and just repeating the same day 43% of the time, the same habits. It's because we're not choosing our next step. And I get it. It's scary to go out there and think, if I take a step, I might fail. But you have to look forward like 20, 30, 40 years from now. If you went out there and said, okay, I at least tried and it didn't go my direction, is that better than just saying, you know what? I never tried. I never went out there and put myself out there to see what I was made of, and never knowing? What would be your choice? And for me, I'd rather go out there and try, see what happened, right? See what I did, right? See where I went wrong. It's a lesson in life than just never knowing.
Yeah. I had an Australian rugby coach at one stage that always used to say, mate, you don't want to die wandering. Mate, you don't want to
No,
die wandering.
yeah,
So, yeah, no, absolutely. And it ties into kind of like that atomic habits kind of thing, too. Change your mindset, change your habits, change your environment. And then now you can build, right? Which is kind of like the next thing. If you just want to give like a brief overview of like just that part of the process for you, too.
yeah. So once you now are positioning yourself for greatness, right? You can look upon the build block, and the build block is really mastering the habits and rituals of who you want to become, right? So if I am on the other side of the table, and that's me, right? That's me at the highest level of greatness, at the highest level of getting the life I want, right? And just, fulfilled, happy, have a great intent family, have great wealth, position myself in a very healthy way, right? What are the habits and rituals that person is? And starting
Yeah.
partaking them into your daily, right? Which now leads you into principle number 5, which is intentionally executing. Because each day you need to be intentional, right? If you're not intentional about getting up and doing those habits and committing to the rituals of that person, well, you're just going to fall back into the level of comfort, because it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
Because what's going to happen here is principle 6, which is being uncomfortably brave, where in fact you are going to start to change and you're going to start to go down new paths. But along that is going to be all the people, right? Everyone who has been part of your universe before this, who are going to try to give you warning, try to hold you back, right? And maybe it comes from a side of love, right? It's not that they're trying to keep you back, but they might not be able to see it within themselves. And so for that, they're going to try and warn you that you need to stop the journey you're on because how could you? It's so risky, right? All these things from, if you're working into a steady job and you go out to start your own business, or you go into this part where you want to run 100 miles, right? And they're telling you, like, oh my God, what happened, right? You have to be uncomfortably brave to what's ahead because you're going to face new challenges that you haven't faced before because the people that potentially have been supporting you down this path of potentially destruction that you've been on are now going to be your biggest, we'll say, opponents on your new journey because they will no longer know the new you. And it could be someone where you might need to eliminate some of the people with you, but or understand that, it could be like your mother. Your mother just cares for you and may not understand it, right? And so maybe trying to give you advice when the advice isn't worthy, right? So if the person hasn't done it, you have to be careful of that advice, right? If you're going to go start a business and your uncle who's worked at, GE for 45 years to retirement tries to tell you how risky it is to start a business, you have to think about, well, where's this advice actually coming from?
Yeah. And then magnify, is that like just zoning in on the stuff that's moving the needle?
Correct. Now you get into this part of accelerated growth, right? Because now, you get into a trial and error perspective when you're building, right? You're building. So it's trial and error repeated right there. So, okay, are these habits and these rituals, are they continuing to build me? Okay, this works, this doesn't work. Okay, so eliminate this. What needs to go in this part? What needs to continue to build and continue to part? You get into a structure right here where, like we were saying before, like you get $1 in, you get $2 back, right? Okay, now let's put $1 million in and get $2 million back, right? You start looking at what works for you, like what works in my diet, what works in my exercise, how has my family grow, how am I showing up as a father? And now you can accelerate that growth in a way that can really put fuel onto the fire. And what happens there is awe-inspiring rise, right? You start to get to a point where you have these things. And we talked when you were on my podcast about how you start to go after these goals that you think are insurmountable. And maybe there'll be a decade out or 20-year goal and you start doing it in 5 years, right? Because you now have the belief system, you have the structure, you have the steps, and you're able to put energy into those steps because now you believe it, not only within the steps, but within yourself. And so you start to have awe-inspiring rise to levels and to goals that you never thought were possible because one, your mind wasn't ready for those goals, right? You never even thought about it, right? To say like, I was growing up as a kid in a family who constantly struggled with money to be able to, be a millionaire. It was two different thought tracks. It was one that, we were never worthy of money to a point, okay, now position myself. And what happens? Well, wealth shows up within your life, within your mind, within your family, within your future, within your faith. And it leads us to the last step. The last step is when you become limitless. And limitless is a pattern that is most important because it's not limitless just within yourself. It's where you can go out and help other people, right? And that's the biggest piece of this puzzle here is that if I'm just succeeding in my own silo, all my own, and doing it all for myself, well, then we're missing the point here. Live 100, it's its own beast because it allows you to not only help yourself, but to level up everybody around you. Because a life well lived is where you are bringing up everybody around you, right? When you're creating an event where the ones who are with you now become better because of the lessons you've learned, right? And you've talked about this, the 100-year plan, right? Of just the family and the family's able to carry through, right? I want to do this for myself, but I also want to do this to empower my children. So my children can go and live a life that they love, that they're fulfilled with, so they can carry that message on for their kids, right? And if you look at that and you can believe in yourself to give yourself the opportunity, what's ahead is not only a better life for you, but for everybody that comes within your sphere.
Awesome. Well put and well said. And that your podcast, that Live 100, is fantastic. So I would highly recommend everybody check that out because you're dropping some gold there on a weekly basis when it comes to this kind of stuff. And I think this stuff is more important now than ever, especially if you're starting on your journey and you're listening to this, right? That's where you need to start. The other things, the investing, the wealth strategies, all that kind of stuff, that'll come, but you gotta fix yourself first. So changing a little bit of gears here, the real estate business that you're in and running, what are you seeing these days in the markets that you guys are operating? What's happening in real estate and what are some of the trends out there?
Markets, we always want to look at like the national level, like, is there a recession, right? Or are these parts, right? But you really market the market, right? And so
Yep.
and when I say we're in 7 different states, we're really in like 7 different cities. So we're in particular cities in each state, right? And so we really act in those parts. And we've seen, of course, that rents have stayed elevated, right? However, you've started to see more people struggle in the past year and a half, 2 years, where renters, especially if you have workforce housing, right? You've had groceries go up 2 to 3 times in pricing, but their paycheck is not increasing 2 or 3 times, right? They may get a 30% raise, but if your groceries go from on average a month, $450, and now it's $825 every time, that starts to bleed them in the back line. So we start to see some renters face that struggle right there. However, we're still seeing strong economics in terms of occupancy, because in the other end, we're not having a lot of people move, right? So typically you'll have somewhere between 45 to 50% of turnover on a year, just on average, just people, moving out of the area to go to a new job, potentially buying a house, just, moving in with roommates or moving away from roommates, getting your own apartment, right? You'll typically see that on workforce housing about 45%. Well, we're at like 30% right now. And you ask, well, what's the question right now? Well, people are saving up, right? Because they still have the thought that they want to get out and buy a home, but they can't afford a home right now. Interest rates have gone where before, when interest rates were, at rock bottom, 3 years back, 3.5 years back, people would go out there and get a house for $350,000 based on what they could get approved for. But that same house today, with where interest rates are, it's $225,000, $240,000 maybe they could get approved for. Well, none of those houses exist, right? Because housing prices are still high. Housing prices haven't rescinded to a point where that people can afford a house. So now they still want to afford a house, but they can't afford the house. So they're staying renters in the same position for longer because they don't want to take on the cost to move to another apartment, because that could be a couple $1,000 for them to have to put out of pocket to go there. So they're staying as renters for long, which keeps occupancy elevated. And when you keep occupancy elevated right there, we're able to get increases in rent from renewals and other parts to continue to push the market rent without having the back end cost of the vacancy or the renovation cost, even if it's just a late turn, even if you renovate the unit. So with tenants staying longer, it helps us on the bottom line because we're not having that cost. Because even if you have a week of vacancy, right, most of the time it's 2-3 weeks in between of a vacancy. If you have that across 100 unit property and say 50 tenants move, you take 3 weeks of lost rent, right? By the time you turn the unit, that's still a massive hit for the vacancy loss across the property. So now we're taking another 20% of that, keeping that to the bottom line. It allows our numbers to really continue to improve from a year to year basis. And if we look into 2026, we've seen in the last few years a record number of units coming online for we hadn't, since I think 2007, 2008, we hadn't met the number of housing units needed because developers just got burned, right? They got crushed. So no one wanted to build. But then you see COVID happen and you can't get permits out to build, and then you have interest rates go to zero. Well, everybody starts putting units online. So finally, the number of units that we needed for a year got met in 1 year. However, over the course of the decade, we're still going to be about 4 million units short. So we've had a bunch of units coming online, which have create supply, but then absorption hadn't hit. But now absorption is starting to go back positive again, where all the units that were being built are starting to be absorbed, and we're not building this next year into this year. And basically new starts are falling off because interest rates are back up, right? Yep. Still supply chain, still a bit of a mess, and just the ability to build in areas you need, right? Most of the areas we're trying to build are blue states, or not myself, but just a lot of the areas where we need units are states where just the government infrastructure doesn't allow it in a way that I want to build today. Well, you might not be able to build for 3 years by the time you get through all the red tape.
Wow. Yeah. So what are you seeing just in where you're living too? Because that's a pretty hot market right now, right? Nashville and Tennessee.
So Nashville, same part, actually had a ton of units come on. There was like 55,000 units came on, right? But it was all in one little window of about 18 months because you had a couple of years of runway that was all caught up in permitting and all the tape, right? Then it got stopped with COVID, and then it all got released at the same time as the interest rates dropped. So all those people started building that wanted to catch that part. So you had all these units that have come on. So for the first time in many years, Nashville went into negative absorption for about 18 months. And so you saw a bunch of units, Class A, come on, start offering 3 or 4 months of basically free rent to try to get people in the doors. But we're finally back to, Nashville has something like over 100 people move into Nashville a day. And if you think about that, that's a lot of people moving in every day. I think if you go down to like Huntsville, Alabama, it's like 7. right? And so you're like, okay, it's a big difference, right? So all these units that have come on, now it's very slow in the number of new units coming on. So we're starting to see positive absorption again. And so Nashville still love the market. It's a great market. We have a ton, our biggest portfolio is here in and around Nashville. We really believe in the future of Nashville, Oracle coming in, right? The brand new Titan Stadium, all these different things, of course, the music industry, right? There's just so much happening here. And so we're really bullish on where Nashville goes, right? But there are points of constraint on any market based on just some of the different variables, right, that occur all at the same time.
Yeah, there's a lot of companies and businesses moving there too. To that national market.
Medical is huge here. Between Vanderbilt, all the different parts, it's just a huge medical area here, right? So there's just a lot happening within Nashville. And if you're like a California company, right, or some of these other companies, right, you're just moving to areas that want to be bullish, right? It's a pro-business state. Even though, the state is red, Nashville, can trend blue, but it's just a pro-business state. We want people here, right, that are going to continue to build and continue to make this a prosperous state. And that's what you see, the energy here in Tennessee is going to follow that trend.
Yeah, I will say every time I've had a stop over there, you can definitely feel the energy there. It's just, there's a lot of construction and things are happening there. So a lot of exciting stuff. What are some of the things that you're excited about and opportunities, in the next, 12 to 18 months in the real estate business?
We've been really bullish Nashville to Chattanooga. We think this corridor is really important right here in terms of what's happening. And we found a lot of opportunity in just owners that have had the properties for a number of years. And I know that's the easiest thing to say, but we've been able to make relationships to be in the forefront of and it gets back to, do what you're going to say and say what you're going to do and do what you're going to say, right? And we've created some great relationships with brokers because we commit and we transact, right? We don't make it difficult, right? We're honest in our approach. Of course, if there's some very big, hairy things that come out of the closet, we'll have to address them, right? But for most of the part, we don't go and nitpick. We go and say, okay, we know the business plan. We know how to operate. So we're looking at just the opportunities in front of us so we can continue to rinse and repeat with the same business plan.
Gotcha. Jason, this has been fantastic, my friend, to catch up. Where can my listeners, where can they follow you? Where can they stay in touch of all of the many things that you're involved in? And just see what you're up to.
Yeah, MC, thank you again. So Live 100 Podcast, you can find that at all the podcast players that exist out there. Instagram, Jason Yarusi, if you want to learn more about real estate, yarusiholdings.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for coming on the show and sharing your journey and your knowledge and just providing so much value as always, my friend. Thank you. And thank you to all of my listeners and my viewers for, again, spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with me on the show today. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. Over 1,000 podcast episodes, 4 books, reports, webinars, and much, much more, all at cashflowninja.com. And don't forget to subscribe to the #1 newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space, the Wealth Dojo. You can subscribe to the Wealth Dojo by going to cashflowninja.com/subscribe. Until next time, live infinitely.
This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.